Billionaire mom sees black waitress wiping her blind daughter's tears and changes her life forever. Hey, can I ask you something real quick? Have you ever walked into a place thinking it was just another day and then everything changed in the blink of an eye? Like, you had no idea that one simple moment would turn your world upside down? Well, that's exactly what happened to me on a random morning in a little diner on the outskirts of town. It was nothing special, honestly, just a regular place with the smell of sizzling bacon in the air and the chatter of people who seemed like they were just there for a quiet meal. The clink of coffee cups, the soft hum of the radio in the background, nothing that would make you think this was the start of something that would change me forever. But there was something in the air that day. Something I couldn't put my finger on at first, but I felt it. And it pulled me in like a magnet. As I walked in, I noticed a woman in the corner. She was working quietly, her movements graceful and patient. A black waitress, focused and kind, with a soft smile that almost made you forget about the world around you. And sitting there with her was her daughter, a little girl, no older than 8 or 9. She wasn't looking around the diner like the other kids. No, she couldn't see anything. She was blind, and I watched her mother wipe away her tears. Tears that were more than just from a moment of sadness. There was something else there, something deeper, something that spoke of exhaustion, of struggles that no one ever saw. I couldn't help but wonder, what was her story? Why was this day different? Before we dive deeper into this incredible journey, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching this from? I'd love to know. And if you're moved by this story, don't forget to subscribe to Mr. Alex Stories and hit that bell icon so you won't miss any future stories that might just change your life, like this one changed mine. And here's the deal. If you're feeling the emotions from this story already, type 1 in the comments. If it's not quite your thing, type 0. Your feedback will help me make better videos for you. Stories that speak to your heart. As I settled into a booth near the window, the sounds of the diner seemed to blur into the background. The smell of coffee, the sizzling sounds from the kitchen, the low chatter from a table in the corner, all faded away, leaving just this one scene in my mind. It was the way she moved, the way she took care of her daughter. It wasn't like anything I'd ever seen before. I could feel it, you know? The love between them was almost tangible, like an invisible thread that bound them together, stronger than anything I could put into words. The waitress, her hands steady and calm, helping her daughter navigate the world in a way only a mother could. Every small gesture she made, her fingers brushing through her daughter's hair, the soft guiding touch as she helped her daughter sip from her cup, was so tender. I couldn't help but admire how effortlessly she made it all seem, like she had this quiet strength that held everything together. She didn't even have to say much. She didn't need to. The way she moved, the way she looked at her daughter, it said everything. It was beautiful, really. But it wasn't just the way she cared for her daughter, it was the way she saw her. The world might have been blurry for that little girl, but to her mother, every smile, every laugh, every movement, every tear was crystal clear. It was a love so deep it made me question things I had never considered before. I was so caught up in the moment that I didn't even realize the waitress had noticed me staring. She turned, her soft eyes meeting mine for a second, and then, almost apologetically, she looked away. It wasn't awkward, though. No, not at all. There was just this shared understanding in that brief moment. A kind of silent acknowledgement that said, I see you, but right now, my world is here. The little girl laughed softly, the kind of innocent, carefree giggle you rarely hear from children these days. It was like music, pure and untainted by the harshness of the world. Her laugh echoed in the space between us, and for a moment, I wasn't just a stranger in a diner. I was someone who understood, someone who felt the weight of what she was carrying, though in truth I didn't know the half of it. I watched as the waitress knelt beside her daughter's chair, her knee softly brushing against the cold tile of the floor. With one hand, she gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her daughter's ear, as if to shield her from the bustling noise of the diner. And in that simple, quiet action, I felt something stir deep inside me. It wasn't just the love between mother and child, it was something else. A deeper, unspoken connection that I couldn't quite place, but I knew it was real. I found myself watching them more than I should have. There was something magnetic about it all. It was innocent, yes, But it felt like something more. I could see the weight she carried, this waitress, the exhaustion in her eyes, the tightness in her shoulders, as if the world was constantly pressing down on her. I wanted to reach out, to offer something, anything, but I knew I couldn't. It wasn't my place. But I couldn't stop looking. She was like a quiet storm, beautiful in her complexity, filled with strength and vulnerability that I couldn't ignore. I could feel my heart pulling me closer, though I didn't understand why. It wasn't just because of her daughter or because of how she cared for her. No, it was something about her. Something behind those eyes. Something that spoke of untold stories. Something that, deep down, I knew I didn't fully understand. And that, right there, made me want to know more. Before I knew it, I was standing, grabbing my coat, and walking toward the counter to pay for my coffee. But I hesitated for a moment. I turned back and saw the waitress again, her back to me now, but her daughter still in front of her, laughing softly at something only they understood. That was the moment, the one where my thoughts felt too loud, and the distance between us seemed impossibly wide. I wasn't just watching a mother care for her child anymore. I was watching something that had the potential to change me, something I wasn't prepared for, but I couldn't pull away. The world felt still, as if frozen in time, for just a brief second. I wasn't sure why I felt this pull toward them, but I knew it was something I couldn't ignore. It wasn't love, not yet, not even close, but it was something that made me question myself and the way I lived my life. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't even thought about before. Sometimes the most powerful connections in life aren't the ones you choose to make, but the ones you can't help but feel. It's strange, isn't it? How the smallest things can trigger something inside you. How one moment can shift the way you see everything. That day, something was definitely shifting inside me. And I'm not talking about the way I watched the waitress care for her daughter. No, that was pure, almost sacred. But there was more. Something else that gnawed at me even when I didn't want to admit it. I started noticing the small things, fleeting moments that didn't seem like much at first, just ordinary, passing gestures. But now they lingered in my mind, spinning around like a puzzle I couldn't solve. The way the waitress's eyes briefly met mine when I paid my bill, the way she looked away as if she knew I was staring at her. It wasn't anything overt, nothing to suggest there was something more, but it was there, underneath it all, like a thread just waiting to be pulled. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe she was just tired, or maybe I was projecting something onto her, something I didn't want to face. But every time she moved, every time she interacted with someone else, I couldn't help but feel like there was something that resonated with me in a way that wasn't normal. Like I was seeing pieces of her that weren't meant to be seen, pieces I wasn't ready for. I caught a glimpse of it when she helped another regular at the counter. The way she leaned in a little closer, that soft, almost secretive smile she gave him, it was subtle, but it made something stir inside me. Was it just friendliness? Or was there more behind that smile? I wasn't sure. But then, the guilt hit me like a tidal wave. How could I be thinking about her this way? I had no business thinking about her at all, especially with what I was seeing. She was just trying to make it through her day, just trying to take care of her daughter in a world that demanded too much from her. I didn't know her story, her struggles. I didn't know what was really going on in her life. So why the hell was I feeling something? I kept telling myself I was just imagining things. I didn't know her. Hell, I barely knew her name. I hadn't even said more than a few words to her. And yet, something was drawing me in. Something about the way she held herself, the quiet strength in her eyes, made me feel like I understood her on a deeper level. Maybe even more than I understood myself. There was a moment, just a flash, that made everything feel too real. I had just finished my coffee, and I was about to leave, when I saw her standing by the door, helping another table. She was bending down to take an order from an elderly couple, and I swear, for a brief second, she looked over her shoulder at me. It wasn't anything obvious, but the way she looked, like she was searching for something in me, it struck me hard. It was almost like she knew I was watching, like she was aware of the tension but didn't know what to do with it. Was I overthinking this? Probably. But I couldn't shake the feeling. The warmth in her voice as she spoke to the regulars, the way she laughed softly when someone made a joke. It all felt like it was too close for comfort. I didn't belong there. Not in her world. I didn't have a right to feel what I was feeling. And yet, every time she smiled at her daughter, or even the smallest gesture of care she showed to the customers, my chest tightened. There was something about her, something that tugged at a part of me I wasn't even sure I understood. It wasn't just the way she was with her daughter. That was beautiful, pure. No. It was her warmth, her kindness. The way she seemed to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders with such grace, as if she was doing the best she could with what life had given her, even if it wasn't enough. It made me question everything. I had no reason to feel this way. She was a waitress. She had her life, and I had mine. There was no connection between us, nothing to suggest that she even saw me the way I was starting to see her. But the more I told myself to stop thinking about it, the more those thoughts kept pushing to the surface. I found myself watching her more than I should have, trying to catch glimpses of her when I thought she wasn't looking. And each time I was torn between the guilt of feeling this way and the curiosity of wanting to know who she was, what she was thinking. I couldn't explain it. I didn't want to explain it. But there it was. Something about her made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. Something that shouldn't have been there. And that scared me. I couldn't tell if it was just loneliness or something deeper. But one thing was certain. I didn't want to feel this conflicted. I didn't want to feel like there was more to this than just a casual encounter. But there it was. And I knew, deep down, it wasn't going to just go away. It was a tension I couldn't ignore anymore. The rain hit suddenly, like it was just waiting for the right moment to make its presence known. 1 minute, the sky had been a pale blue, the kind that made the diner feel warm and inviting, like a quiet escape from the world. But the next moment, dark clouds rolled in, and the heavens opened up, sending sheets of rain slapping against the windows with a force that made the whole building shudder. The diner, once bustling with casual chatter and the clink of silverware, now felt like it was in a different world. The soft hum of the storm outside seemed to drown out everything else, leaving behind an eerie, almost sacred stillness. The kind of stillness that wraps itself around your thoughts, presses them into your chest and doesn't let go. The kind that made every moment feel more intimate, more charged. The dim overhead lights flickered once, twice, like they were struggling against the weight of the storm outside. The flickering only added to the feeling that something was about to break, like a fragile thread that was stretching, waiting to snap. And that's when it happened. I was sitting there staring out the window, lost in my own thoughts. Thoughts I didn't want to acknowledge when I felt a soft, accidental brush of warmth against my hand. It was brief, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to make the air feel like it thickened. I looked up, startled, and found the waitress standing right beside me, her hand still hovering over the coffee pot she was reaching for. She had brushed against me as she moved, her fingers grazing my skin. For just a moment, neither of us moved. She looked at me, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. A brief hesitation, like she wasn't sure whether to apologize or pretend it hadn't happened. But we both pulled away quickly, as if we'd touched something we weren't supposed to, and yet the tension hung in the air like smoke. It was inescapable, suffocating even. The world outside the diner was a blur of rain, and inside, there was only this small, charged moment between us. Neither of us said a word. It wasn't necessary. The silence screamed louder than anything either of us could have said. I could feel my heart racing, my thoughts tumbling over each other. Why was I feeling this way? Was it just the storm making everything feel more intense, more alive? Or was it something else? I wanted to tell myself that it was the weather, the rain, the dark clouds, making everything seem so heavy. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. The storm outside wasn't the cause of the tension. It was what was happening between us, in this small space, this little corner of the world that had suddenly become too close, too personal. I watched her as she moved back to the counter, her hands a little more trembling than before, the way her fingers tightened around the coffee pot. Her face, usually so composed, now looked a little uncertain, like she was trying to hold herself together. And I couldn't stop watching. I could feel my breath catch in my throat. There was no reason for this feeling, no reason for the electricity between us. She was just a waitress. I had no claim over her, no right to these emotions that were beginning to feel too real. The rain continued to fall harder now, hammering against the windows, as if to drown out the thoughts racing through my head. But no matter how loud the storm grew, it couldn't drown out the way I was feeling, the way the simple touch of her fingers against mine had sent a shock through me, a jolt of electricity I couldn't ignore. And yet, I had no place here. I didn't belong in this space with her. She had her life, and I had mine. The guilt hit me again, like a wave crashing against my chest. This wasn't right. She was a stranger, a mother just trying to make ends meet, doing what she could for her daughter. She didn't need me complicating her world with my thoughts, with my feelings. But the more I tried to push it down, the more it fought its way to the surface. It wasn't just the storm. It wasn't just the rain or the flickering lights. No, it was something more, something I couldn't explain, and something I didn't want to admit. I wanted to look away, to focus on something else, to lose myself in the clinking of silverware or the low hum of the storm outside. But every time I looked at her, I felt that pull again. I felt it in the way she carried herself, in the way she moved, in the way she existed in that space with such quiet strength. And when I finally stood up to leave, my hand brushing against the edge of the counter, I felt that same twinge of electricity again. My skin still tingled from where we had touched. It was just a simple accident, just a moment, but I couldn't shake it. I couldn't ignore it. I stepped outside into the rain, the cold air hitting my face like a slap, trying to clear my head. But it didn't work. The storm was inside me now, swirling in my chest, just like it was swirling outside. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't know what to do with the mess of emotions that had taken root in me. I didn't know if I wanted to run from it or dive deeper into it. But one thing was clear: the storm had only just begun. The next few days passed in a blur, each one dragging heavier than the last. I couldn't shake the feeling of that moment, the touch, the storm, the tension that hung between us like an invisible thread. It wasn't just a fleeting feeling anymore. It was a constant hum in the back of my mind, an electric current I couldn't turn off no matter how hard I tried. I started avoiding her. It wasn't conscious at first. It was just easier that way. I found myself staring at my phone more often, pretending to check messages, scrolling through nothing in particular, anything to avoid looking her way. Anything to avoid the warmth that seemed to settle in my chest every time our eyes met. But every time I glanced up, I saw her. Just a little too close, just a little too familiar. She was always there, moving through the diner, offering the kind of quiet kindness that seemed to follow me even when she wasn't near. Her smile was soft, but I knew it now. It carried something deeper. It was a smile that held secrets, a smile that made me want to know more. I couldn't stop myself from looking. Every time our eyes met, there was that same unspoken understanding. It wasn't just me feeling it, I could see it in her eyes too. But I couldn't admit that to myself, not yet. The guilt was gnawing at me, pulling at my conscience like a tug of war I couldn't win. And then, it happened. One evening, I sat in my usual spot by the window, trying to avoid the way her presence made everything inside me feel too exposed. I was staring at my phone again, willing the minutes to pass. But I could feel her presence getting closer, like she was drawn to me. And before I could brace myself, she was standing there, right beside me. Her voice was soft, almost tentative, as if she was unsure of what to say. "You've been quiet today. Did I do something wrong?" Her words hung in the air, just heavy enough to make me freeze. I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to say something, to reassure her, but the words wouldn't come. I couldn't lie to her. She'd know. She always did. She was too perceptive, too attuned to the little things. She'd seen the way I pulled away, the way I looked at her, and then quickly turned my gaze elsewhere. I could feel her watching me, waiting for an answer. My mind raced. What do I say? What could I say? The last thing I wanted was to hurt her, to make her feel like she was the problem. But the reality was that I was the problem. It was me. I'd let this thing between us grow out of control. I forced myself to look up, meeting her eyes for just a split second before I quickly turned my gaze back to the phone in my hand, hoping the excuse of checking a message would shield me from the truth I couldn't face. But the truth was, there was no escaping it. I couldn't keep running from what was happening. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to hurt her, but I didn't know how to let go either. She had become a constant in my thoughts. even when I tried to shove her to the back of my mind. I couldn't get rid of the image of her, of the way she looked at her daughter, the tenderness in every gesture. I couldn't ignore the way she had touched my hand, as accidental as it had seemed, how it had felt like the universe itself had conspired to pull us closer. I felt a deep ache in my chest, something raw and painful. I knew what I was doing wasn't right. I knew I should have walked away the moment I felt that first pull, but I hadn't. I hadn't been strong enough to resist. And now, here she was, standing in front of me, vulnerable, questioning if she had done something wrong. And in that moment, I wasn't sure anymore if I was the one who had messed things up, or if it was her. It felt like everything was a blur, like I was losing control of the situation, and yet deep down I knew I couldn't walk away. I didn't want to. But I couldn't stay either, not like this. I didn't answer right away. The silence between us felt so loud, so suffocating. I could hear the faint hum of the diner, the soft clatter of dishes, but all of it felt miles away. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could almost feel the weight of the guilt pressing down on me. Was it my fault? Had I let things get too close? Too personal? I couldn't say. I didn't have the answers. All I knew was that I wasn't ready to walk away from this connection. And that scared me. She stood there for a moment longer, her gaze softening as if she could feel my inner turmoil, but then, just as quickly as she'd appeared, she turned away and moved toward the kitchen. The emptiness she left behind was palpable, a void that I didn't know how to fill. But the guilt was still there, crawling up my throat, clawing at my insides. I couldn't keep pretending that I didn't feel this, whatever this was. I didn't want to hurt her, but I didn't know how to stop myself from being pulled into something that felt both beautiful and dangerous at the same time. As she disappeared into the back, I sat there for a long moment, unable to move, unable to breathe, lost in the whirlwind of emotions I couldn't control. It wasn't supposed to be like this. It wasn't supposed to feel so impossible to let go. The storm outside had grown louder, the rain battering the windows in a relentless, almost violent rhythm. Inside the diner, though, there was only silence, a thick, suffocating silence that felt heavier with each passing second. I sat across from her, my hands nervously twisting around the coffee cup that had long since gone cold. My heart pounded in my chest, the weight of the moment pressing down on me until I thought I might suffocate under it. She had been quiet for so long, I could almost feel the words hanging in the air between us, unspoken, but so present that they seemed to vibrate. Her eyes avoided mine, her fingers tracing the edge of her coffee cup. But I could see the tension in her posture, the way her shoulders were slightly hunched as if bracing herself for something she wasn't sure she could say. I wanted to speak, wanted to say something, anything, to break the silence, to ease the ache in my chest. But I couldn't. The words felt stuck, caught in my throat like a knot I couldn't untangle. Finally, it was her who spoke. Her voice was low, almost fragile, as if each word weighed more than she could carry. I think about you more than I should, but I know that's not right, she said, her gaze still fixed on her coffee. Her voice faltered slightly, but she pushed on. I just don't want to be alone. Her words hit me like a punch to the stomach, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I felt the tension in my chest tighten, like my ribs were being compressed by a force I couldn't control. The guilt that had been gnawing at me, the fear, the confusion, it all crashed down in that instant, drowning me in a wave of emotion I wasn't sure how to navigate. But it wasn't just guilt that I felt. There was something else too, a strange sense of relief. Because as much as I hated what was happening, as much as I knew it was wrong, there was a part of me that couldn't deny the pull I felt toward her, toward the way she made me feel seen, understood, and maybe, just maybe, not so alone in a world that often felt so isolating. I looked down at my hands, unable to meet her gaze. Was this it? Was this the moment where everything changed? The moment where I had to admit the truth to myself? I didn't want to feel this way, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I could hear the tremble in my words, the uncertainty. But I've been thinking about you too. Maybe I'm just afraid to admit it. The words left my mouth before I could stop them, and immediately, I regretted it. I wasn't sure what I was afraid of. whether it was the admission of my own desires or the consequences of allowing myself to feel this way. But there it was, hanging between us, like a thick fog I couldn't clear away. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of the rain outside, the steady drumming against the windows, and the soft hum of the diner. My heart beat loudly in my chest, and I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. I didn't know how to handle what I had just said. How could I? It wasn't supposed to be like this. She wasn't supposed to make me feel this way. I wasn't supposed to feel this way. But the truth was that I did. And the more I tried to shove it down, the stronger it grew. She looked up then, her eyes meeting mine for the first time in what felt like an eternity. There was a vulnerability in her gaze, a softness that made my heart ache even more. I could see the hurt, the uncertainty, the fear that mirrored my own. "I shouldn't have said that," she whispered, almost too softly to hear. "I know I shouldn't have. I don't know what else to do with all these feelings. I'm so tired of being lonely. And I thought maybe you could understand." Her confession hung in the air like a delicate thread, each word a confession of her own vulnerability, her own isolation. I wanted to reach out to her, to tell her that I understood, that I had been feeling the same way, so lost, so unsure of what to do with this connection, this bond that felt too complicated to explain. But I couldn't. I couldn't let myself cross that line, not when I knew how dangerous it was. I couldn't allow myself to fall deeper into something that would only hurt both of us in the end. I couldn't allow myself to be the reason for whatever pain was waiting on the other side of this. I understand," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "But this isn't right. We can't—" I stopped myself before I could say more. What was I even trying to say? That I wanted her? That I was just as afraid as she was? I didn't know anymore. She took a deep breath, and for a moment, it felt like everything had come to a standstill. The rain outside seemed to intensify, the sound of it a constant reminder of the storm we were both caught in. I could see her fighting with herself, the way her eyes darted away from me, as if she couldn't bear to face the truth that had just been laid bare between us. "Maybe we're both just looking for something we can't have," she murmured, her voice soft and fragile. "But I don't know how to stop feeling this way." And just like that, the weight of the moment grew even heavier. The silence between us was thick with unresolved emotion, with unspoken feelings we both knew we couldn't ignore anymore. But neither of us knew how to stop this. Neither of us knew how to walk away from the truth that had just been confessed. The silence between us felt unbearable, like the air had thickened, pressing down on me from all sides. I could still feel the weight of her words hanging in the air, her confession, raw and vulnerable. It was as if the floodgates had opened, and for a moment, I thought everything we'd been holding back would come rushing out, consuming us both. But it didn't. Instead, there was a stillness that settled deep inside me, a clarity that was almost painful, but necessary. I had spent so much time wrestling with these feelings, trying to convince myself that maybe they weren't wrong, that maybe I wasn't wrong for wanting her, for wanting to feel connected to someone who seemed to understand the quiet ache in my chest. But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't right. I wasn't the person I needed to be if I let this go any further. I couldn't let myself fall into something that would only end in regret, in pain, not for her, not for me, not for the life I had built, and certainly not for the people who would be hurt if this secret ever came to light. I can't keep doing this. The thought repeated in my mind, louder now, as if my own heart was urging me to act before it was too late. Her eyes were still on me, soft, pleading, but I couldn't hold her gaze any longer. I stood up, my legs shaky beneath me, as if the very act of rising from that table was a physical manifestation of the weight I was carrying. She didn't move, didn't speak. There was only that heavy silence between us, and the relentless rain outside, as if the world itself was holding its breath. "I'm sorry," I whispered, more to myself than to her. My voice was thick with the pain of the words, but there was no turning back now. "But I can't keep doing this. It's not right." The words felt hollow, like they were just a formality, something I had to say to make this moment feel less like a betrayal. But deep down, I knew they were true. I didn't look back as I walked to the door. My heart pounded in my chest, and every step felt like I was leaving a piece of myself behind, a piece I wasn't sure I could ever reclaim. The weight of the decision was crushing, but it was the only way forward. I could hear her voice behind me, faint and fragile, like she was struggling to find the words to stop me, to make me stay. But I didn't hear them clearly. I couldn't let myself hear them. I reached for my jacket, my fingers fumbling with the buttons, and I left the diner without another word. But even as I stepped out into the storm, my heart torn in two, I knew this wasn't just the end of a conversation. It was the end of something deeper, something I would never be able to forget. As I walked to my car, I paused. My mind raced. Should I just leave? Should I go without a trace? But no. I couldn't just disappear without acknowledging the weight of everything that had happened. I turned back, my body trembling from the cold wind and the lingering ache in my chest. I walked back into the diner, my heart heavy with the knowledge of what I was about to do. I grabbed a napkin from the counter and scribbled a few words with a pen I found tucked away in my coat pocket. It was simple, but it was all I could say. I'll never forget this. Take care of yourself and her. I wish things could have been different. I folded the napkin carefully and placed it on the table where we had sat. Then, without another glance, I turned and left again, this time for good. As I stepped outside, the storm was still raging. But now, it felt different. It wasn't just the storm outside, it was the storm inside me, the turmoil, the guilt, the sadness. But there was also a strange sense of relief. I had made the choice. I had walked away. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I knew it was the right one. I didn't expect to hear from her again, not after everything, not after I walked away with all the heaviness in my chest, the weight of a decision that felt like it had split me in two. The rain had stopped by the time I reached my car, but the silence still felt so loud, so suffocating. I sat there for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring out into the streetlights that flickered in the distance. My mind was still racing. Questions, doubts, the ache of knowing I had left something behind that had felt so real, so raw. I hadn't even realized how long I had been sitting there, lost in thought, until my phone buzzed in the quiet of the car. A message. From her. I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity, the words swimming before my eyes. I could feel my heart skip a beat, an unexpected twist of emotions tightening my chest. You weren't alone in feeling this, but I understand. I hope you find peace. It was simple. So simple, yet the weight of it hit me harder than I could have ever expected. She wasn't asking for anything. There was no anger in her words, no plea to change my mind. It was just understanding, a kind of understanding that only someone who had felt the same kind of confusion and longing could offer. I read it over and over again, each time the words cutting through me a little deeper. You weren't alone in feeling this. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to respond. What was there left to say? The words had already been spoken, the decision had been made. But my thumb hovered over the keyboard. I wanted to type something back, something to bridge the gap between us, to somehow make this feel less final, less painful. But I couldn't. I knew I couldn't. I thought of what she'd said in the diner, about not wanting to be alone. I thought of the way her hands trembled when she held her daughters, how she had poured all her heart into those small moments of tenderness. The love she had for her little girl, the quiet battles she fought every day to keep everything together. I thought about the way she had opened up to me, about her fears, her vulnerability. I could still see the quiet desperation in her eyes when she'd admitted that she thought about me more than she should, and I realized then, more than ever, how much she had risked by letting herself feel something for me. Something forbidden. Something that, just like mine, had no future, no chance of survival. I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes. There was no need for a reply. I had already made my peace with everything. But that text, it lingered in my mind. The weight of it followed me through the days that came after, and with it, a quiet ache that didn't fade. It was a reminder that we were two souls who had touched for just a brief moment, sharing something that couldn't be fully named but would never be forgotten. I didn't respond, not because I didn't want to, but because in a way I felt like I had already said everything I needed to say. The silence between us now was just the final chapter. There was nothing more to be written, and yet, even now, as I reflect on it all, the memory of that moment, the rain, the confession, the decision to walk away, stays with me, wrapped in a quiet sorrow. A reminder of what happens when two people meet at a crossroads, each carrying their own burdens, their own needs, their own longings. And while I didn't respond to her message, part of me still felt her presence, still felt the weight of everything we had shared. Maybe some connections are just meant to be felt, not spoken. Maybe some things are just meant to remain unsaid. But in the quiet that followed, I realized something important. We were both walking away. Not just from each other, but from the kind of pain that comes with wanting something that you know you can never have. The message stayed there on my screen for a while, just sitting there, waiting. I eventually locked my phone and tucked it away in my pocket. It didn't need a response, not from me, not anymore. You know, sometimes we feel things we're not supposed to. Emotions, desires that pull at us when we least expect them. We try to bury them, ignore them, pretend they don't matter. But there they are, lingering, growing, whether we want them to or not. Was I wrong for feeling the way I did? For that connection, that moment of understanding that, deep down, I knew could never be anything more? Was it a mistake to let myself go there even for just a moment? Or maybe that's what makes us human, right? To feel deeply, to want more, even when we know the consequences. We make choices, we question them. But in the end, it's those moments of vulnerability, of raw honesty, that shape us. They shape the way we love, the way we hurt, and the way we let go. And it's hard. It's hard because we're left with this gray area, this space between what we think is right and what we feel is right. Is it wrong to long for something that seems so impossible, something that's forbidden? Or is it simply a reflection of our need to be seen, to be understood? I keep wondering about that, about her, about us. What if things had been different? What if we had been able to talk more, to explore those feelings? But then again, maybe that's the whole point. Maybe some moments are meant to be fleeting, to just exist as a memory, as a lesson. Because sometimes the hardest thing to do is to walk away from something that makes you feel alive, even when you know it's not yours to keep. Sometimes we just need to accept the truth of what we're feeling, without judgment. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. So, was I wrong? Or was I simply yearning to be seen? Maybe I'll never know the answer, and maybe that's okay. But what do you think? Was it wrong for me to feel what I felt? Or is it human to desire something more than we're allowed to have, to long for something even when we know it's impossible? I'd love to hear what you think. Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to Mr. Alex Stories. Maybe you'll find another story that makes you think, makes you feel a little more deeply.